Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Soul School Sojourn. Happy Friday, happy Saturday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, whenever it is you're catching the rebroadcast of this show. We're so happy, so excited that you guys decided to join us tonight. I apologize that it's just me and my two friends and not Andrea. We know her personality pretty much takes up the whole show. So it takes three of us to make up for her lack. But trust me when I tell you tonight that I think we're going to come close to making up for it with the two guests I have tonight, because these are two brilliant minds, brilliant thinkers, and just incredible people. And I'm so excited to have them on tonight. I did just want to say happy Friday to you all, and just say, as I always say whenever I get the chance to, how excited I am to be able to have these conversations with you guys each and every Friday evening. This really has become the highlight of the start to my weekend, at least, being able to have these conversations with you all. I was a pastor for 12 years, grew up in a rather conservative Christian environment, existed in something of a very restrictive environment, and was not able to have the sorts of conversations openly that we are able to have Friday night on this show, with guests like the ones that we have tonight, with Andrea Weekly. And so I love this. It's just the highlight of my week. And so thank you to all the viewers who tune in every week. Please share this with your friends, share this on your pages for your friends and family to see. And as always, just so honored to be here with you guys tonight. And I don't want to take up too much time with introductions because we don't have a lot of time. And if I know anything, at the very least, about myself, when I get talking, time goes by really quick. It might not go by quick for those listening, but it goes by quick for me. And when I'm engrossed in good conversation, it tends to go by even quicker. And I know we're going to have that tonight, so I want to leave plenty of time for that to happen. But Aaron Tomlinson is joining us tonight. You all probably recognize him if you're a regular viewer of the show. There have been a few different occasions where Andrea's been speaking at a convention or doing whatever it is that paranormal celebrities do in their spare time or lack thereof. And so Aaron's joined us several times in the past, and we've had great conversations and I've heard great feedback. Aaron is a former pastor like myself, a spiritual teacher, YouTube personality, works in counseling. I don't want to describe it in a way that maybe not be accurate, but works in counseling at the very least, I know. And Aaron, I don't know if you want to just say anything in way of greetings and
Sure. Thanks, Jeff. It's always great to be here with you and with your audience. And yeah, I'm a licensed professional counselor in Colorado. So I work in the mental health field now, was a pastor for 20 years. And so, yeah, it's just great to be here again.
Awesome, man. And it's great to have you here. And we also have joining us tonight for the first time, Wendy Francisco. Wendy is an artist, a musician. We went over this today, so we made sure we got it right, Wendy. An artist, a musician, a singer, and probably a whole lot of other things that we just don't have time to go into tonight. But she's a lot of different things, has been involved in Christian ministry of one form or another for decades. Her and her husband are very well-known musicians and singers within the Christian world, extremely well-known, in fact. I really encourage you to look them up on YouTube after this. You'll be blown away by who it was you've been listening to us in conversation with for the last hour. And I know she won't say that because she's a humble individual, but very, very, very incredible career they have had. And I will also say this: I've met them in person, and just incredibly sweet, humble people. And I was blown away when I actually realized who you guys were, because I think I first met you at the Miller's Church. I know that's where I met you, actually. Mike and Marilyn Miller's Church in Fort Collins. And, I saw the name, Don and Wendy Francisco. It rings a bell, but it's not exactly my era that I grew up in. But I still knew the songs when I heard them. And I'm like, hold on a second. When you guys did the concert, I'm like, I know who these people are. Are you kidding me right now? And so I was really blown away. And I was extra blown away just when I was able to spend some time with you guys afterwards and just see how down to earth and kind and loving you were. And so anyways, I don't know if you want to say anything just in way of intro and introing yourself, anything I may have missed before we jump into things.
I don't know. I think you did a pretty good job. I know that earlier this evening I called my daughter and I said, I think I'm going to be on a podcast about UFOs tonight. She was like, oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, we do a little bit of everything on this show. We call it Soul School, Sojourn, and that's kind of, I don't know, a zip file sort of name, I guess, where it's like one little collection of words, but you can click on it and it can contain a lot, I guess. So, some weeks we talk spirituality, some weeks we get into UFOs and the paranormal. You never really know what you're going to get. And, to be perfectly honest with you, I don't know exactly what we're going to get tonight, which makes it even more exciting because it's just like going into a conversation, not blind, because I know who you guys are, but like, I love these ones where, well, and it's how Andrea and I do it anyways. We don't really plan too much. We send each other like a text midway through the week and we're like, what do you think about this? And we're like, sounds good to me. And then we maybe we text each other a lot, but as far as the show topics go, that's usually what it is. And then we get on and we just talk. And I love those types of conversations and just free flowing podcasts and recordings as well. So I'm looking forward to this one tonight, guys. We all come from similar backgrounds. Like I already said at the start of the show, we all at least come from Christian backgrounds. Actually, I don't know if I said this at the start of the show. I said it to you backstage before we came on. But we all come in one form or another from a ministry background. I was a pastor. Aaron, you were a pastor. Wendy, yourself and Don, you guys have been in music ministry of all sorts. I'm not sure if you were ever on staff at churches or anything like that. I don't know, but probably, right? Yeah. So we all have rich histories in ministry. And we all also had experiences of what is colloquially now called deconstruction, where the beliefs we once had stopped working, at least in the way that they once worked for us. And we had some rapid and massive paradigm shifts, whether it was concerning the nature of God as wrathful and vengeful, hell, all sorts of different things like that. And that's kind of how we all came together, I think, was through our shared jettisoning of certain beliefs. It was kind of how we met. It was addition by subtraction, quite literally. And so we all have shared history in that. And then we've all found our way back to something approximating a new normal in different ways.
Yeah.
And we've had various spiritual experiences, some of which are centered more in a kind of Christian mystical tradition, some of which are more paranormal in nature, some of which just maybe could be classified as spiritual. We don't really know how to describe it, but all of us kind of found our way back to something like a new normal over the years. And that's kind of what I want to talk about tonight. And we can really go wherever you guys feel like going. You can feel free to share as much or as little as you want to share. And I promise I won't press too hard if there's things you're not really comfortable talking about. But, like you guys know, I think, but just to kind of refresh, I come from a pastoral background. I was a pastor for 12 years. Somewhere in the midst of that, I began to have radical shifts in my beliefs. And it led to me becoming more grace-based in my teaching and preaching and understanding of God. And that allowed me to ask questions that I never allowed myself to ask previously. And the asking of those questions eventually led to the sort of unraveling of my faith entirely. And there was a season of my life that while pastoring, I was an atheist for all intents and purposes. Probably for maybe a year or so, I really was. And, yeah, maybe I was the kind of atheist like Jesus was on the cross who says, my God, have you forsaken me? Which is to say, there was a day in which I still had a relationship with a guy I didn't believe in, or who I felt forsaken by in some ways. It wasn't just like straight up Richard Dawkins atheism, but I kind of lost that entirely. It dissolved on me. It went bye-bye. I couldn't find it. And then through different ways and synchronicities and experiences and whatever, it all kind of came back together in some way. And I talk about it often on the show, but in the Hegelian dialectic, you have the idea of thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. And I think our lives usually follow that pattern. We begin with a thesis, something we know, something we're sure of. We encounter the antithesis, it blows apart on us. It goes bye-bye, and then you have the synthesis where things come together that you never thought would come together, and you find yourself standing on something like a sacred solidity once more, even though it might not have been what you would have considered sacred in the past. And so we've all found our way back through various ways. And, you know, I've got some stuff I want to say, but I've said a lot already. I kind of want to just maybe give you guys a few minutes to just intro yourselves a little bit, maybe talk about your own background and history. You know, and Wendy, if you're comfortable, we can start with you because, you know, Aaron, I know you've been on before and you've been able to share before.
Yeah.
Feel free to jump in the conversation. But if you want to share just a little bit about your history and Christianity and ministry and all that kind of stuff, where things started to change and shift for you, and kind of what you came back to, where you are now. I know that's a lot to say, but just feel free to start walking us down that road, and we'll see where the conversation.
Aaron go first?
You want Aaron to go first? Okay, yeah, Aaron, if you want to go first, man. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So I was pastor for 20 years. I was involved in ministry for, 6 or 7 years before that. So, you know, associate pastor, youth pastor. So pretty much from the time I was 18 years old until the time I was 48, I was doing something in full-time ministry. Almost all of it, except for the first couple of years, was charismatic centered. Jeff, you and I know some of the same people. We've ran in really very, very similar circles. And I would say about 2008, I started going through some sort of seismic shifts in my faith, but it wasn't unraveling. It was just shifting from, like you said, belief in a wrathful, vengeful God to a more loving, gracious God. Maybe some of my ideas about what the Bible was changed, different stuff like that. And then in 2016, I've shared on here before, I had a really powerful meditation encounter that completely unraveled everything for me in like 20 minutes, which was kind of crazy. I mean, I felt like a reverse Saul on the road to Damascus type of experience where the Christian scales kind of fell from my eyes.
The anti-Damascus.
Yeah. And then I had to figure out, you know, I will tell people when you have a real awakening like that, like I did, it's not really the most exciting thing in the world because you see all the patterns of dysfunction that you didn't see before. And you realize I've got a lot of work to do. And so it took me, you know, a while to unpack that. In the meantime, somewhere along those lines, when the pandemic hit and stuff, we just became apparent that we really needed to change directions. And I've just kind of been in a wilderness for the last 4 years or so. And incidentally enough, last time I was on, Jeff, I can't remember if it was in the broadcast itself or if it was when we were talking afterwards, but you shared something so profound with me that it really did help me move out of that antithesis type thinking that you're talking about and move into more of a synthesis. And I love that you said, you know, we don't know what to describe it, how to describe ourselves sometimes. And I think we are at a new place collectively, many of us, where there aren't necessarily settled definitions that describe how we experience the world or what we believe. And so that's a little bit of my story. And Wendy, I have to tell you, my mother-in-law, I know from the time I met my wife, you guys were like her favorite Christian artists and her favorite songs. And so my wife grew up listening to the albums and stuff like that. So it's just a real treat and pleasure for me to be able to be part of this and hear your story.
Oh, that's cool. Is it my turn?
That's my segue.
We'd like for it to be. If you're uncomfortable, we can keep talking, but
no, it's okay. Thank you for going first because it kind of gave me an idea.
Sure, no problem.
Yeah. Well, you know, I got into evangelical Christianity when I was in high school, and it's kind of neat because I before that wasn't raised with it, you know. So my dad was a Jew, and not the religious kind, but the science kind, like the Einstein kind. My mom was an English teacher and an artist, you know, and so we didn't have any of, you know, some of the tough stuff to navigate, you know, that you have in evangelicalism when I was a little kid. But then I fell hard when I was 17, got born again, and well, you know, went into all the stuff, and that was I don't know. It's like so hard to summarize things like this. I guess in one way that was really neat because I had so many experiences getting to know God. Like, I don't even like the word God, to tell you the truth. The consciousness of the universe. I mean, the word God kind of has a little bit of baggage because
for sure
it can mean a controller and someone who needs to have virgins thrown in the volcano so he can stay in a good mood, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But so there were a lot of amazing experiences, and then there were a lot of hard things. Like, it, I'm 68, so back when I was a senior in high school, when all this happened, things in Christianity were a great deal more conservative, and so here's this young woman who wasn't raised with any of this gender ridiculous stuff, suddenly feeling like, I don't fit. I'm a terrible Christian because I haven't the faintest clue how to clean a house and wash dishes, and I don't know, what am I going to do with all my art, music? Oh my gosh! And so that there was kind of all that to struggle through, and really had very fast. I married Dawn in '95, and that was my second marriage, and we went all over the world. I mean, I already had been a recording artist and traveled around the country. But with Dawn, I went around the world, and they were really good years. I mean, it's, I saw the good, the bad, and the ugly all over the world. I saw really dead cultish religion, and I also saw people raised from the dead, and I saw crippled bones straightening out. I mean, I saw that with people I knew in my living room. So, like, I knew it wasn't like staged or anything like that. So really, I'm very thankful for the journey that I've had, because I've gotten to see so much of the cultishness and dysfunction, and came to think that was largely through the retributive theories of the cross, that where it's kind of a protection racket, and that really is the main message of Western Christianity, and it makes people crazy.
Yeah,
I mean, you can't live with that, and so when it fell apart for me, it's a little bit ironic, because I thought, well, I'm going to find out what this book says, because I'm such an idiot. I've been letting everybody else tell me what it says. And yeah, here I'm basing my life on it. I've been all over the world. I don't know which cow is sacred anymore. They're all different. All the sacred cows in all these churches are completely different. And so I started looking up women, and it helped me, because instead of deconstructing, like, I have to get away from this, it was like, wow, a lot of these things are very arguable when you look in scripture. And I, starting to think that scripture is supposed to be taken like these ancient Jewish guys that were trying to understand, like playing dueling banjos with all these concepts of God. And here we come like a freight train with all our kind of oppressive doctrines, and it really, like, maybe 80% of that evangelical thing is overlaid over scripture, and it really isn't what scripture, I think, is trying to say. So for me, deconstruction was like getting the needles out of the haystack, out of the haystack, and I kind of went that direction instead of having to bulldoze all of it. But I almost did. Yeah, I had my almost atheist moments too. So I'm a woman, and we're more verbal, so I'll stop there.
Oh yeah, no, you're good. Yeah, no, I feel it, and I relate to you. I relate to you, except for on the woman part. I don't understand that. But no, I mean, I grew up charismatic, just like you guys. I saw I never saw the dead raised. I saw the woman with the fainting spell in the back that the evangelist said was dead. You know, that happened a couple of times just to be able to put it in the newsletter that they had a resurrection.
Oh,
and I was like, she
dear.
didn't die. She does that all the time. No, but you know, I saw the miraculous. I saw things happen before my eyes that I can't explain. In my very early 20s, I came down with a case of shingles. Which is odd, but that's what that's the stress. That's stress induced, you know, from being in ministry, and in just a couple of years, living like a couple of decades, it felt like. And I went to a meeting, and in the middle of the meeting, you know, I just felt heat gall all over my body, melt them off, and they just fell off like sand, you know, and it was killing me. I mean, it was terrible. It was terrible. I mean, so I've seen things like that right in front of my eyes, you know. So
I mean, I don't think we own that though. Like Christianity doesn't own that. It's
no, certainly not.
a human thing.
Yeah. Well, and then that's part of it, you know, and I know, Aaron, you'll probably have something to say about this too. It's like you have experiences like that, and then you have them in a certain context. And those experiences come to us from wherever they come to us from, God, universe, whatever one wants to say, you know, just to be whatever. They come to us. They pass through the membrane of our belief systems before they reach us, though. They pass through the film of the belief that we have around us before they reach us. And so by the time they reach us, they're dyed the color of our belief system, right? Yeah. And so they then end up confirming to us what we believe to be true already, because how could this happen? You know, or I'm sorry, I believe this certain way, and then this is happening, or it's happening in the context of a church service where, let's say, hellfire and brimstone is being preached. Because I lived in the midst of the Brownsville Pensacola revival for several years, if you guys are familiar with that movement. And so, I mean, I saw insane things happen. I mean, just in the middle of a prayer meeting, the entire room just hits the floor because a presence comes in the room that is like, it just feels like getting hit by a semi-truck, you know, and you weren't asking for it. I've been in meetings where, I mean, just crazy stuff. And yet at the same time, from behind the pulpit, you're hearing, you know, you're a filthy sinner. If you even, you know, if a woman walks past you and your head even slightly turns, it doesn't matter if you even looked at her, you still had the intention of committing adultery in your heart. Therefore, you're an adulterer. It's like, you know, but I'm not married. How can I be an adulterer? It's like, well, then you're a fornicator. It's like, oh, geez, I can't win, you know. But it was like, but you have the experience in that context, and then the experience seems to confirm the context in which you had it. And you know, over the years, one of the things that I've experienced is the dissolving of the film between me and whatever it is that the experiences come from. Yeah. Right. And so, Aaron, I don't know. I feel like you have something to say about that.
Yeah, I was chuckling because I was thinking about, you know, especially the Brownsville culture and that really harsh Pentecostal legalistic culture. So terrible for women, you know, because a guy might see a sexy kneecap or elbow or something and
an ankle
causing him to stumble, right? You know, it's so ridiculous. One of the things I've been thinking about this, and I love, Wendy, that you said, you know, we don't corner the market on that stuff. And that's one of the things that really opened my eyes, was getting around other people with completely different belief systems that were experiencing the same types of phenomenon that I was experiencing as a Christian. And so what I've been able to do, or the way I've been thinking about this lately, is that we can validate the phenomenon and then understand that our explanation for that phenomenon can be completely inaccurate. So I would relate it to, you know, ancient people, modern people in the future that live on Earth. They're going to see the sun rise and set, right? Rise and travel through the sky and set. That phenomenon is valid for all of us, but the explanation for that phenomenon has been different over the history of humanity, right? So whether it's a fiery chariot that's running its course through the sky and then goes down under the sea to fight the sea monsters or something during the darkness and night, or whether it's planet Earth as part of a solar system that's revolving around the sun in a giant universe, the explanations couldn't be more different, but the phenomenon for each person is going to be the same. And so I think where I've landed with it is it's okay to validate the phenomenon and leave the question open as to the explanation for that phenomenon. And to what you're saying, Jeff, we thought we had the explanation. You know, God's confirming the word with signs following. And I came to a place pretty early on when I started deconstructing, no, the phenomenon's happening in spite of our doctrines, not because of our doctrines, but in spite of our doctrines.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the ways I like to think about it. Like this phenomenon that so many people have experienced all around the world. It's one of the reasons that I couldn't go into atheism was not only because I'd had those experiences, but because when I would talk with them, talk about them in the context of atheist communities, oh no, that stuff doesn't happen. You know, it's complete invalidation of the phenomenon, because if we validate the phenomenon, we're afraid we might be validating the explanation for the phenomenon that we've been given, and we've done away with that. So then we just do away with everything. So that's a little bit of my thoughts on that.
I agree with you completely, man. And it's funny because how I went down the atheist path, it actually kind of boggles my mind when I look back at it now. But because I had so many experiences, like I said, I mean, I was in the Pensacola revival for years. I saw I mean, I'm telling you, there was something genuine happening there. Call it, the collective faith of 7,000 to 10,000 people gathering every night for 7 to 8 years in a row. I mean, that just stirs something up. I mean, God literally only knows. I don't know. All I can tell you is that there was something palpable and real every time I walked on the campus of the school, every time I passed through the doors of the building. It was something real and genuine. And yet the message I was hearing is completely antithetical to the gospel that I now believe to be the gospel, you know? So I had these experiences that I couldn't deny were real. I grew up in a house that was, for all suits and purposes, haunted for 13 years of my childhood. I mean, saw things that are the stuff of horror movies. I mean,
really,
Hollywood level special effects, you know? I mean, and I'm not even kidding you. I don't tell that kind of stuff to a lot of people because they think you're insane. But that's one of the reasons why I said I love having this particular venue to have these conversations, because you say it here and nobody thinks you're insane. Everybody's like, yeah, me too. But the funny thing is, you know, I went down that path, and I think it was because if I'm going to be honest with you, I think this is the reason I went down that path, because I was so terrified of the demonic in particular. That was one of the things that really haunted my mind was experiences with the quote unquote demonic. And I'm not saying there aren't such things out there as dark entities. I definitely think they are. What exactly it all is, that's another discussion for another time. But there certainly are energies that are darker, right? But I was so afraid of that because I grew up in an environment and in an atmosphere where that was all you heard about. And any kind of spiritual phenomenon was typically that. If it didn't look like prophesying and speaking in tongues or falling on the floor, it was probably demonic. And we were told, you know, that 1/3 of the angels fell from heaven. So there's at least in that whole angelology and demonological construct, there's at least twice as many angels as there are demons. And yet all the spiritual activity was somehow demonic. I don't know how that works, but it just was the case. And so I was terrified of that kind of stuff, though, because of what I grew up in. And so I kind of took comfort in the atheism, because I could shut that out. I could explain it away. And I did. And I listened to all the debunkers, the James Randys, the Darren Browns, all these guys. I went through all of it. I explained away all of the experiences I had. And then, funnily enough, Wendy, it was, I had kind of begun to make a return in my heart. But I was still struggling internally. And it was my first trip to speaking at the conference at Father's house in Fort Collins, where we first met. I was returning home from that conference. And, you know, I was a passionate preacher, still am a passionate preacher. I believed what I said, but I was still struggling inside with some of the vestiges of those experiences that I had gone through. And a friend invited me over to watch the movie The Conjuring. And I would have not watched that movie in the past because I was terrified of such things. But at the time, I had kind of jettisoned all those beliefs and didn't believe it was anything anymore. And he invited me over to watch it. We watched it, scared the absolute pants off of me, for one, because I hadn't really watched a good horror movie in a while. But it also awakened something in me because it felt so similar to what I grew up in as a child. Not necessarily the demonic aspect of it, but in a way, but just the sense, the way they captured certain things, it awakened something in me, and it reminded me of the reality of the spiritual world that I grew up in. And that was when I started to have this strange awakening, like this memory of like, there's more to this world than material. there's something more at work than all of that. I don't know exactly what it is. It might not be all that I grew up to be taught it was, but there's certainly something more. And that's one of the reasons it's so serendipitous that now every week I host a show with the eldest daughter from the family whose story that movie is based on. And we met through a complete random series of events. So it's just one of those amazing full circle events. And even you here tonight, I just thought of that yesterday, that I watched that movie on the heels of having come from that concert and met you for the first time. I was just like, this is just one of those really cool full circle sorts of moments. But
well, it was so neat too that a week before you told me about this, that you were doing, and I had no idea that you were even exploring these things, because I fell down the Dr. Stephen Greer rabbit hole big time, and it's almost been a year. And that's the science in me, and I'm all into all the tech. You know, to my dad's company sent stuff to NASA, and I'm all into that. You know, and I just had no idea, mind blown. And so on top of deconstruction, it's almost another one, learning about the military industrial complex. It just changes everything. I mean, like, anyway.
Yeah.
Yes. It was so great to hear you say that, because I hardly know what to do with all these things. I'm having the best time. I wish we had more time, because Aaron, I had the most mind-blowing experience in meditation. I was using a Native American format, and I had to struggle through integrating that with my Christian or my Jesus self, you know, in a way that I could feel safe.
Yeah, I can relate to that, actually.
As I figured out how to do that, I just had this mind-blowing experience, which I don't have the time to say, and I would love to hear what yours was, you know. And I do just think that there's so much more out there, that there are many levels of things, and it seems like it's busting out all over the place. It takes a lot of energy and some study to try to process, especially when you're like going to be 70 in 2 years. It's like, why they? You know, it's a lot to work through, you know. And it was so great that we had watched Andrea just right before.
Yeah, because when I said it, you knew who you were like, we just watched the documentary that she was in. Yeah.
So it's like, oh, I know her. And we really liked her. And we don't always feel that way, because there's like a lot of sensational stuff, and we've seen a lot, and we've really tried to research a lot. So when some of the weird stuff comes on, we're like, like, I think this one's going to have Jaws music.
Right. Yeah. And appropriately so. I can tell you one thing about Andrea. I've met a lot of people in this field now through her, different events and such. And I can tell you, she is 100% the real deal. And, you know, all you have to do is hear her tell the story. And, you know, the old phrase, the old saying, you know, a man or a woman with an argument is never at the mercy of a man or a woman with an experience, because there is a conviction and a punch that experiential speech packs that nothing else can. And when you hear her talk about her family's experiences in the farmhouse, I mean, you know, there's reality behind it. And, you know, the moment we first talked with one another, there was just this, you know, I know this is real. I knew it was genuine.
Wow.
And, but it's just amazing, the things, right? The things that are used to draw us back into a place of wholeness and integration. You know, like in my former Christian life, The Conjuring, that would have gotten you possessed by a demon. You know, even, I mean,
no, that's so true.
Walking past a theater that was going to be playing the movie in the future would have gotten you possessed by a demon. You know what I mean?
So right.
Like, watching it certainly would have, you know, hanging out with Andrea definitely would have. I mean, that's the kind of strict background I came from. Yeah. And, you know, some of you listening, I'm sure, can relate to this. I know you guys definitely can, because I can, again, experience versus argument. I can tell by your expressions, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And it was like that would be the thing that would bring me back to something like Christianity. Blows my mind. You know what I mean? That would be the thing that awakened me to the reality of, all right, son, remember all those things you discounted, all those things that you found ways to explain away this phenomenon and that phenomenon, and who knows, it was just pareidolia, seeing faces where there are none, the experience with the Ouija board, okay, that was just the idiometer effect at work, and who knows, maybe some of these things are actually, explainable, but there were moments and there were times, where you knew the unseen touched you, you touched the unseen, whether or not it was all the dark, dreary, demonic things that I thought it was, or it was just presences that I was unaware with passing through the membrane of my beliefs again, and that's how I interpreted it. I can't really say at this point. It's too far in my history to say, but I knew there were moments, there were times where I touched the numinous and the numinous touched me. And it was that movie of all things that brought me back to this place, right? And it brought this part of my being that I thought I had to discard. It brought it together. And I was thinking about that today. And I told you I was going to go on maybe some weird little rant for a second, and then I'm going to let you guys talk. But I was thinking today about how, okay, in the Christian world in particular, and maybe to the audience that you've not seen this because, this is kind of a niche thing we're talking about. It seems like the whole world, I think, to us, because it's kind of the world we're in on social media and stuff. At least it's the world that I'm in. But it might not be something that's all that familiar to the audience. But in the Christian world, at least, certain parts of the Christian world over the last decade and some change, there has been this movement called the deconstruction movement, for lack of a better term. It's a lot of different forms, a lot of different manifestations, but it essentially looked like people questioning their traditionally held to beliefs, the things that whatever, that's to make it very simple. And some people have gone down different paths. Some people have become atheists. Some people have gone down maybe a more alternative spiritual path. Some have, come full circle and become like Orthodox. Some have come full, I don't even want to say if that's full circle, but they've maybe gone even to a more hardcore form of Christianity than they had before, after losing it all. It's manifested itself in a lot of different ways. But one of the common themes I'm seeing now is that there is this sort of coming together, right? There are people, I mean, just like us, right? We're all a little bit different in the way that we view things, I think. I can tell from when we talk. It doesn't bother me at all because I love that, actually. I love that we're all different in how we see things. And yet we're all coming towards that center point. We're all really converging upon the same thing. And we all struggle to wrap vowels and consonants around what that thing is. But it is a thing that we are being pulled towards. And we're being pulled towards it through different sorts of experiences. Like for me, experiences from my childhood that were stirred up in me through the viewing of a movie, things that have happened subsequently, that maybe another time we could go into. Aaron, your experience, Wendy, your experience, and plenty of others that you guys haven't disclosed, I'm sure. And we're all being pulled towards this central point. And I was meditating today on the verse where Paul the Apostle says that, basically at the end of all things, three things will remain: faith, hope, and love. The greatest of these is love. So in other words, at the end of all things, at the eschaton, when all things are done away with, the one thing that will remain is love. And the way we often think about that is that everything's essentially going to be burned up, and only that which can't be burned up is going to stick around. And maybe that is how he meant it. But I was thinking about it just in a little bit of a different way today. And I was like, what would the end of the world, the end of history actually look like scientifically? It would look like another singularity, like what happened at the beginning, the cosmic singularity, in which theoretically all matter and energy in the universe is drawn together in this dense point, right? Whether it's the Big Bang or the let there be of Genesis or whatever, however one views that, where everything in the cosmos, everything that we now know as reality, is drawn together in this dense, hot point that our textbook usually told us was about the size of the period at the end of the sentence telling us about it. And then this explodes outward, and we kind of observe that reality because we see that the universe is expanding. So if it's expanding, at one point it contracted. And there are theories that say at one point it will all contract again. and that would be another cosmic singularity that would then manifest in another Big Bang or recreation. Well, I think even if whatever one thinks about that, it seems that life works that exact way, right? It seems that cycles and cultures happen that way, where there are these moments where things are drawn together, where we come to an end of something. And I don't necessarily believe that there's going to be a literal end of the world in any kind of religious sense, but it definitely, I'm definitely getting the vibes in the present era that we're at the end of something. You know, we're at the end of something. Whatever it is, I don't know. Carl Jung would, if you read his book Aeon, he would talk about the end of eons and how whatever. It's an incredible read. I don't know that I understood it, but it's an incredible read. But there is this point where things converge and come together, and then there is recreation that happens. And I was also thinking about Terence McKenna, his whole idea of the time wave theory, and how when events begin to stack on top of one another, how one day with all of these crazy events happening is actually longer than 1 billion years with like very few events happening. And it just kind of seems like we're at a moment in time right now where there's just so many things stacking on top of one another. There's so much complexity. And I wonder if it's not because we're being drawn together. And if we're being drawn together, that means we're closer to everything than we were before. And there is this convergence we're coming upon. What that is, I don't know, but it seems like something like that is happening, even just in microcosms in various communities. And as a result, we're bumping up against phenomenon that in the past we would have absolutely eschewed and tried to cast out in the name of Jesus. And now, but because we are being kind of drawn together in this way, we're bumping up against things, up against people, up against experiences and ideas that otherwise were anathema to us. And I just love that. I love that everyone I talked to who 10 years ago was maybe a strict evangelical, a Baptist, a Pentecostal, whatever, all of them are kind of like, yeah, I had some experiences, and you realize you're not near as weird. You're not near as alone as you thought you were. That this is happening a lot. And the truth is, I mean, for as many people that are talking about it, imagine how many aren't, because it takes something to say it. Dude, the amount, you have no idea how much I hemmed and hawed before I actually would share some of the things that I now share. I was terrified. Absolutely terrified. Accepting Andrea's invitation to speak at the first UFO conference I spoke at, I was excited. I mean, come on. How fun is that?
Yeah.
Also, I was terrified because as a former pastor, reputation is everything. And I've been disinvited from big events that were helping to keep my mortgage paid, because I was just speaking alongside of the wrong speaker that certain people didn't like. I mean, that used to happen to me all the time. And I'm like, man, I'm really putting my reputation in the wood chipper here. But then I'm like, who cares? It's all going in the wood chipper anyways. I may as well have a fun time on my way in, I might as well go in with other people that I actually want to be with. And I don't know though. I don't know. I don't know if that even makes sense, but I was thinking about it today and how we're all converging on the same point, and we're all struggling to describe what that point is. But we all know we're there. We all know we're on our way there. And on our way, we're encountering things that we never thought we would encounter. And we get together and we talk, and we all have similar stories, and we thought we were the only ones. And I don't know. I just think that's amazing. I don't know if you guys want to share anything on that or just anything else you might want to share.
I'll jump in real quick. Something I find interesting, and this is kind of a microcosm of what you're saying that you kind of brought out earlier in the conversation, Jeff. It made so much sense to me when you're like, I had to embrace atheism for a season because I had so much fear of the demonic. And I was laughing so hard because I remember someone saying, they got demon possessed because they watched the movie The Exorcist.
Yeah.
And, I remember another church in town, they visited some family to like exorcise their house or something, and they found a box of Lucky Charms. And
that'll do it, man.
Lucky Charms, they had to get rid of those because that's what was giving access to these experience. It's just so goofy, but that stuff is so fear-based and so ingrained. And I think we do choose our worldview while we're working through. You brought up Carl Jung, while we're working through what he would call the shadow self, right?
Yeah.
So you had all this stuff in the shadow self that's influencing you towards the James Randys and And then, but then, and this is where you helped me in the last time I was with you, or one of the times when we talked, I definitely shoved the preacher Christian me into the shadow, right? And then had to bring that back up. And so I see that as kind of that sort of convergence, right? That it's a process.
Yeah.
And I will share this. One of the things that is interesting to me, because I do believe we're at the end of a aeon.
Mm-hmm.
Do believe that there is something new. I think there is something brand new that's going to emerge. I think the scripture in Hebrews chapter 12, everything that can be shaken is being shaken. I mean, we're living in a time that historians will write about, right? I mean, you go into the History Channel or any of these spaces, and you can find documentaries about World War II, like hundreds of them, right? And we're living in that kind of time where historians will unpack everything that happened. But I do think there is something that is so new that is emerging that there isn't a language yet, because all language is based on references to the past.
Yeah.
I can only know what something is because I have past experience with it. And we're moving into something that no one has any past experience for. And so we're struggling to come up with a language to describe it, because there isn't a language yet to describe it. We get to create the language that's going to describe what's emerging. And so that's how I tend to respond to what you're saying and think about it. I'd love to, Wendy, to hear your thoughts.
Oh, I love that. In fact, a little bit earlier, I was thinking that I personally sometimes feel that my thoughts get ahead of what needs to be expressed in words. And I think maybe corporately, we're all experiencing that. There isn't a language to what's happening, and I try not to get too panicked about it, because in the past it was so important to have that narrative and be homogenized and safe, fitting in the narrative. So if we're going to deconstruct, we got to get the wineskin too, right? And start to be comfortable with diversity, because diversity was not a part of the past. It was this desperate need to belong in a narrative. And one of the things that it's so interesting to me, that at the core of Calvinism and the retributive versions of the cross, precisely what that is that the narrative is more important than the individual human.
Yes.
So when you deconstruct that and go to some of those earlier theories of the cross, where it was complete and it was a demonstration of love and the value of humanity and those kind of things, what happens, and it could be what's rocking the boat, I don't know, that we're starting to consider our innate value, not our value as judged by a religious narrative. And what's so exciting, that it's kind of mind-blowing, but honestly, science was as bad as Calvinism when it came to valuing individually, because in biology that I was raised in, pond scum, like the joke was, we're like evolved pond scum. Well, now then, I guess in the 30s, when they were postulating quantum mechanics, and that kind of had to trickle up through religion, and it takes a long time for things to get to the popular level. And I'm not a scientist, but I am a science fan, so I read about the stuff that breaks this down for people that aren't scientists. But like, there's so much in science now talking about the instantaneous, the mechanism of entangled particles, as the speed of light is not the fastest thing, which means, like, I know it sounds crazy, but like, if you prayed for somebody in Mars, you wouldn't have to take the speed of, there's actually a mechanism for the speed of thought. It's instant. And so all these things are now, and they're saying is consciousness an aspect of the whole universe, which I think it is, And so what this does is like, oh, we're not an accidental pond scum. We're a human. We're something very valuable. Each of us, not just corporate and not just whatever narrative, but something innate. And it's like kind of happening in both science and religion in a way that dialogue wasn't there when I was a kid. It isn't how I learned either thing.
Yeah.
And so I think it's really rocking the boat in probably a good way.
Yeah.
And resulting in some of these major shifts and,
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I agree with you. And I think the whole idea of the lack of language to describe what it is we're experiencing is fascinating, because what you're talking about, 100% true, that a lot of stuff is being undone. And then there's also stuff that we're coming to similar conclusions about, science and religion. And we're like, oh, but we can't talk about this religious way anymore. And then the religious are like, oh, but we can't talk about this in a strictly scientific way. What are we going to do? And I think one of the things that's happening, Paul Ricoeur said that an idol must die so that a symbol of being may begin to speak. And I think we are inherently religious creatures. And I think religious language is hyper important. I think it's almost evolutionary. It's in us. But I think the deconstruction movement, one of the things it's doing is it's smashing idols and liberating the spirits that were encased in those things symbolically, so that we can return actually to a language that is extremely valuable, but that once upon a time we couldn't hear or speak without being very triggered by what we heard and or spoke. And so like at this point in my life, I can talk about Jesus, I can talk about Christ, I can talk about the Gospels. And to me, it's a totally different thing than it was once upon a time, because an idol has died and a symbol of being has now begun to speak. And so I can take these same words and attach them to realities and things now that I once upon a time wouldn't have even known what they were. And I love it's the Psalm, I think 84 principle that I always use of one thing you've spoken, two things I've heard. There's a meaning there that goes beyond the meaning. And I think that's part of what it is. Anyways, guys, we're at the end of our time together, unfortunately, and it breaks my heart because I could definitely go another hour talking with you guys. And that just means we're going to have
UFOs. What am I going to say to my daughter?
Well, let's do it right now. Do you believe in UFOs?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, well, you can say we talked about UFOs now. Well, and you want to know what? It just means we'll have to do it another time. Absolutely. Because there was so much stuff I know we all wanted to get into. And but like I said, time flies when you're having a good conversation, and this was a good one. So guys, thank you so much for joining tonight. I encourage everybody to check out Wendy and Aaron's stuff. Look them up on Facebook. Look them up on social media. They're just a wealth of information, and you'll enjoy what you find. Anyways, thank you so much for joining. Oh shoot, I didn't say class is in session tonight, but class is dismissed. Peace.